Hello, this is Vicky from the Spellbound Bead Company, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this pair of charming Corgi earrings. To make the Corgi motif, you're going to need a few beads. So I've got some pumpkin coloured delicas, I've got some matte white delicas, I've got some matte pale rose delicas and a few matte black delicas. I've also got some 3mm black facets and a 4mm clear facet, although this 4mm facet can be any light colour that you have. The Corgi is made in two parts, so you've got the front and back, like so. And again, we've got a grid to show you how to do this. It's made in brick stitch. It looks a bit peculiar because obviously we're leaving voids for the eyes. We're going to fill those in with facets when we've made the face. So as I say, we're working in brick stitch. So we're going to start with this long row here that's just across the top of the nose. We're going to work down to the point of the chin, and then we're going to work up to the tip of the ears, including leaving the gaps for the eyes. So let's get started. You can see from the grid that we need to start across here, and we're going to start with a row of ladder stitch. So we've got 3 pumpkin, a white, 2 black, a white and 3 pumpkin. So we'll start by picking up those beads. So I'm working with a size 10 needle, and I've got about 1 metre of white Nymo here. You can use another thread if you prefer, it's whatever you're comfortable using. So I've picked up the 2 pumpkin colour, and I'm going to stitch those together so they sit side by side. So this is ladder stitch. So there we go. So that's 3 of those. Then a white bead. Now you can't see the matte black delicas on the actual Corgi face. They're actually sat under this 3mm facet here, but having them in just means that you can see more easily where you're going to position that facet when you come to it. So if you don't have matte black and you've got shiny blacks, they'll work. If you've got a dark brown, use those instead. It's basically just a dark colour to indicate where your nose is going to sit. I wouldn't use a bright colour, I wouldn't use a big contrast colour, because you are going to see the edge of the bead around the edge of the delica bead around the edge of the facet. So just choose something that's obviously different but still a bit subtle. We don't want to make it look like it's got a bruised nose or anything like that when you get further on. Okay, so I'm just working my way across here. So I've just got the 3 pumpkin beads left to put on. And that's the 3rd one there. And there you can see we've got, it's sitting a little bit wonky, we've got our first ladder stitch row, which is this row across the face here. So I'm going to go ahead and work down to the point of the chin, and then I'll come back up. We'll add this row here, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I've done the shaping around the face. So I shall be back with you shortly. So as you can see, I've done the lower portion of the grid. So everything from the eyes down to the chin. And we're now going to start working up and around this space, these spaces here. So my needle's coming out of the end of this bead here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this bit of brick stitch, then I'm going to ladder stitch on the central portion, attach these beads, come back up, ladder stitch on the rest of this row, and then come back down to connect it, because that's the most stable way to do it. If you've got a different way that you prefer to do it, then go ahead and do it your way. This is just my suggestion of how to work. Once I've done that, I'll do this complete row across the top of the head. I'll do the ears individually, but I'm not going to add these 2 beads on here until I stitch the front of the motif to the back of the motif. So let's get started. So I bring the beads over a little bit so we can have the grid in shot. Those and the pink. Now, my Corgi's ears aren't entirely symmetrical. I've got an extra pink bead on one side to the other, so that's up to you if that's something you want to do or not. You can always just colour in the extra bead on the grid if need be. So I'm going to start, because it's brick stitch, I'm going to pick up the 2 beads on this row together. So we'll pick up the 2 pumpkin beads, ginger beads, whatever you want to call them, and come up there. And that's this 2 here. So now I'm going to add these 3. So we start with 2 again. And then add the 3rd. Okay, so this next row, I've got the pumpkin and the pink to start, so I'll pick those up there, and we'll come under. And then the next pumpkin one, which is that one there. Okay, so that's the bottom of this ear here. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pick up the next 4 beads and ladder stitch them one at a time, which will support the sort of the top of the nose and the bottom of the forehead. So we'll start with pumpkin. And then 2 whites. So there's 1. And there's the second one. And then the other ginger. And I'm going to bring my needle back out through that white one so that I'm on the correct side of the beadwork. Okay, so it looks a bit peculiar at the moment, but it will come to shape. So that's these 4 beads here, which are going to support these 3 beads underneath. So I'm going to turn my work upside down so that I'm working on top of the row, which is how I prefer to do it. I'm just going to put my needle under that thread bridge there, so it's just in the right place, because if you get this bit out, if this isn't central, then you're going to end up with a dog that's looking at you slightly askance, which isn't really what we're aiming for. So I've picked up a ginger bead and a white bead, and I'm going under the thread between those 2 white beads there. And then back up through that white bead. And then I'm picking up the other ginger bead and going under the next thread along. Like so. And then I'm just going to go under that thread there, and I'm going to pick up the next row. Oops. This is the the beauty of shape beadwork, which is these two white beads here. So pick those up as a pair. And go under. And then up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this in place, and I'm just going to use a brick stitch thread path, not going to add any beads, just to make sure that they sit in the correct place. So I'm coming under, it's this thread between the two white beads on the right hand side there. So I'm going to come under there. Look like a thread caught there. Oh, I've just got a little knot, so let's get rid of that. Thankfully it's just a slip knot, so it pull loose. There we go. So pull that through. Now, before I do anything else, this thread's starting to get a bit twisted, which is why it keeps knotting. So I'm just going to run that through my fingers and just take out the twist so that I don't get another knot. And then I'm going to go back up through this white bead that I'm coming out of. There, and now that bead is stitched into place. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now, this is going to be a little bit fiddly because everything's in place. So do it a step at a time. So I've gone down through the white bead. I'm going to find, just use the tip of my needle to find the loop of thread. There. Yeah, that's under. Pull that through to the back of the work and then go back up that white bead that's there. Okay, and that's the central portion of the nose stitched in place. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come across so that I'm coming out this end bead here. I'll come up that one and go down that one. Like so. And now I'm going to add on these 4 beads across this row again here. So that's the row that we're ladder stitching onto. So I've got a brown, 2 pink and a brown. And apparently I can't decide whether this is brown, ginger or pumpkin. So it's all 3 of those. And then I'm going to stitch these 2 rows on, connect them on this side like I've just done in the middle, and then come back up and work back across. Now the pink. And the ginger. There, and to make sure that one's nice and secure, I'm just going to loop through that second time. And then I'm going to add the next 3 beads on the row, which are going to be a brown, a pink and a brown. Brown and a pink. So I'll come up and back through. There. And then this next row is just 2 of the pumpkin ginger beads again. And go onto those 2. Right, that's not pulling through, so I've caught the thread somewhere. So I'm just going to take that back because it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to move, so you may as well undo it. There we go, that's got it. So I'll thread the needle on there. There we go. So I'll come through, I'll go back up through the bead. And just take your time to make sure everything's sitting in the right place. Just use the tip of your needle or your fingertip, whatever's easiest. And now this time we've only got one connection here because the bead's going to overlap at the end. So just make sure that it's sitting correctly. So I'm coming out of this ginger bead and under that thread loop, and I'm actually going to come up the bead on the other side there, and you'll find that that will sit in the right place. So you've got your two eye sockets just there, and again I'm going to reposition my needle. So I'm coming out of the the next bead in the right place. So I'll come out this one on the end, and then this time I can just brick stitch all the way across the row and everything will be nice and connected and nice and firm. So I shall do that, and I shall work up one ear, this one first because my thread will be over here, work through this ear, work through the thread, make the second ear, and then I'll come back and show you how to put the eyes and the nose on. Okay, so as you can see, I've finished the front of the corgi. I've got the spaces for the eyes, which currently look a bit creepy. So let's put some facets in for the eyes and solve that problem. So I'm coming out of the top of one of the ears at the moment. So I'm just going to reposition the needle so that I'm coming out of the bead that's on the, as I'm looking at it, on the left hand side above the eye. So we'll come down through some beads. And then through that one. And then we're going to pick up a 3. And we're going to go in at the bottom of the eye. You've got 3 beads that are under the gap, and we're going to go down through the middle one. So it's the, I don't know what we decided, ginger pumpkin brown bead just on the bottom of the cheek. So we'll go down through that one, and you need to pull reasonably firmly. It's not going to fit entirely in the hole, it's still going to sit proud of your beadwork, but it'll give the corgi a bit of a nicer look to the face. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to, as I'm repositioning the needle, I'm going to add the nose. So I'm going to come down through that white bead that's diagonally underneath the bead I've just come out of. I'm going to pick up the 3mm facet, and I'm going to go down through the white bead on the other side of the nose. So I'm not actually connecting through the 3 black beads, it's connecting either side. Right, so just unhook it, but it sits quite nicely across the top. So then I'll come back through the facet and we'll go back down through that bead we started from, and just pull that. You want to pull it firmly so that it's sitting flush but not too tight, because what you'll end up doing is cupping the corgi's face, and then that's going to look that's going to make the face look wrong. So we'll do that, and then we'll come back through the facet, up through that white bead again, and then we'll come out in the right place the bottom there to attach the other facet for the eye. So there's our third black facet, and we'll go through the outer edge. We'll go through that bead on the outer side of the eye, like so. And there we have our corgi face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off both these thread ends, and then I'm going to make the back of the corgi head. So I'd start across a wider point here, and then work down, and then come up and add the ears. When we've done that, I'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to stitch everything together. So as you can see, I've now got my front and back of my corgi done. I've finished off all the thread ends on the front, and I've also tied in the tail thread on the back as well. So I've only got one thread to manage, because when I made the first one, I found I got into a bit of a knot. So this is the way I found easiest to do it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stitch the front and back together through all the beads on the edge of the corgi, on the edge of the motif. So we're basically using a version of square stitch. So we're just going to stitch all the way around the edges. When we get to the top here between the ears, we're going to add some extra beads on, so that we've got these extra beads across the top of the head. And we're also going to drop a facet in this. That's what your 4mm facet's for, just to give the head a little bit of dimension. So these are just a few things that we need to bear in mind. So I'm going to start stitching across the bottom. I'm then going to work up and across. I'm going to add the extra beads, work up, and then when we get to this side where the hole, where we're going to still have a hole, I'll drop the facet in then, because if we drop it in too early, it's just going to keep rolling out and getting in the way. So I'm going to hold the two motifs back to back. My thread's coming out of the back thread nearest my finger. So I'm going to go down into the bead at the front, and then I'm going to come back up through the bead that we started with, like so. I'm then going to go across, and I'm going to go down that next bead and up. Whoops, she says. Just take your time. This is a bit fiddly. And then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go up through that bead, the next bead diagonally up, to reposition the needle, ready to start the next row. So, and because these two motifs are identical, it's just a case of stitching one bead to the corresponding bead on the other figure. So I'll come up, and then I'll come back through. Just be careful you don't accidentally tie your thread in a knot as well when you're looping round. Oh, the other thing that we're going to do that I forgot to mention is we're going to add a point to the tip of the ear when we get to the top. So I'll keep working till I get to the top, and I'll be back with you when I get to the tip of the ear. Okay, so I'm just getting to the tip of the ear here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across, and I'm going to stitch the two pairs of beads across the top of the ear together first. So there's one. And there's a second. Now this time what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move the needle so that I'm coming out, as I'm looking at it, I've got the front of the motif facing me. I'm actually going to come out of this bead on the back on the right hand side. So we'll go back up through that bead there. And then I'm going to just pick up a pumpkin delica, and I'm going to come in through the front left bead as I'm looking at the work there. And what that will do is it'll just position the delica across the top, and it just gives that little tufty hair point look on the top there. So I've done that. So now I'm going to continue down this side of the ear, and then we'll add the beads across the top of the head. So I'm going to go up. And you're working in quite a tight space here, so this is a little bit, you haven't got a lot of room to work in. So just take your time. Okay, I'll come down. So there we go, that's the last of the ear beads. So I'm going to have to come under, and then I'll go back through this one again. So this has got an extra stitch in it, and I'm going to reposition the needle so that I'm coming out of the first of these 4 beads between the ears. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up another pumpkin delica, and I'm going to go down through the bead on the front of the head. I'm then going to go up through the white, and I'm going to pick up another one and come down. So we're working back and forth across the top of the head. Whoops, just up. And in, a little bit tight through that one, and then up and in. So we're just adding the 4 beads, whoops, across the top of the head, and then I'm going to continue by repositioning the needle again. So come up through there. And when you're doing this one, just make sure that your thread goes down in the right place. Like so, and then we're going to reposition the needle. And we'll stitch around this ear, and then we'll add in the 4mm facet. And don't forget, when we get to the top of this ear, we're going to stitch the beads together, and then we're going to add the ear point bead as well. There's one. Okay, so top of the ear again. Okay, so that's the first half of the ear stitched. And that's the second. Now this time we need to reposition the needle so that we're coming out of the back left and we're coming into the front. So this one's going to need a little bit more repositioning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down into the row below and come back up and out through the correct bead. I'm going to pick up a delica and go in, like so. And then I've come out of the bead on the row below and I'm just going to work across this row. Just be careful you don't overfill your delicas, because we're using matte delicas, they're slightly more fragile. You want to make sure you haven't got too many threads trying to go through, because if you do that you do run the risk of breaking a bead, which at this point in the process would be incredibly frustrating. So okay, and through that one. And just okay, now as I'm working back down this side here, I've just got to remember to put that 4mm facet in. So we shall do that when I've done this stitch. So I'll come right through there. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to use my scissors to just open up that cavity in the dog's head, and I'm going to drop my 4mm facet in. Now if we're going to connect this into a pair of earrings later, we want to try and make sure that the 4mm facet is running so that hole runs top to bottom, and you want it sitting behind the nose ideally, because you want to push the nose forward to make it look a bit more like a dog. So that's that. So then we'll finish stitching this down this edge, and then I will show you how we're going to turn them into a pair of earrings. So I shall be back with you once I've finished off my thread. So as you can see, I've got my two completed motifs, and I've got some gold head pins and some gold ear wires. You can use any colour you like. I just thought the gold looked quite nice with the colour of the heads. I've also picked up some wire cutters and some round nose pliers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by finding the gap between the pair of beads at the bottom of the chin. And I'm going to go through there, through the hole in the 4mm facet, and then I'm actually going to come out at the top of the head between those, the centre of that row of 4 beads that are across the top, just like that. And that is your Corgi on a head pin. Now, if you've got some crown bead caps, I think I've got one just here I can show you. My assorted bag of tricks. We can give the Corgi a little crown if you want to, or you could give it go full on coronation crown, depending on how fancy you want to go. I'm going to leave mine plain. And then you can also cut this to any length you want. You need to bear in mind that you want the bottom of the earring the top of the earring to sort of skim the bottom of your earlobe. So you can leave this long, you can trim it shorter. If you prefer, you could actually, because it's got a reasonably flat back, you could just glue a stud back onto the back of the earring as well. I'm going to leave mine full length, and I'm just going to turn a loop on the top of the pin. So I'm going to make a P-shaped loop, like so, and then I'm going to bring it back into a centralised loop. Now, what I have done is I've turned that loop in the wrong direction. So I'm just going to turn the eye pin around, the head pin around, like that. And then we'll open up the loop on the bottom of the ear wire, and we'll hook that on like that. So do that again on this second one. So you might just need to do a bit of a wiggle just to make sure you're going up through the facet and then out centrally. You need to make sure you come out as centrally as you can, because otherwise your pin will sit wonky. Now, if you've got a pin like this, it's just got a bit of a curve in it, just manipulate it between your fingers to straighten it up. And again, we'll turn the loop, we'll straighten it up, and then we'll attach the ear wire to this one as well. And there we have our pair of Corgi earrings.